From the Signature Bank Studios, this hour of the Shaun Thompson Show is sponsored exclusively by DonleyAuctions.com. They need your guns. Sell for top dollar. DonleyAuctions.com.
I love America. I love the Constitution. I love the First Amendment. I want to carry and all else. I love property. And let me tell you something. If you care about your country, read Ludwig von Mises and the 6 lessons of the Austrian Economic School, motherfuckers.
From the streets of Melrose Park to the trading floor of the Merc, he's fought for every dollar he's ever earned. And now, with personal liberty and our system of capitalism under assault in America, he's here to seize back our rights from the government. With a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Declaration of Independence in the other, he's Shaun Thompson. And this is the Shaun Thompson Show.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag.
I think it's crucially important when we discuss the Islamo-Nazi regime in Iran, we have the proper context of exactly how long this nonsense has been going on.
We need to have a realization that we've got about 35 years worth of oil left in the whole world. We're going to run out of oil. When Mr.
Now that
Nixon
moron,
famous,
Rockefeller, financed peanut farmer, was really the beginning of it, the start of it, but he was just a tool. You might say it started with George Bush Sr. and the CIA. You know who does a lot of reporting on the Middle East, on everything with the Pentagon? The Pentagon correspondent for the Epoch Times. That's who. Ryan Morgan, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Aggravated, Ryan, because I've been watching this for the bulk of my life, and I remember the 70s, and I remember Jimmy Carter, and I remember the hostage countdown. And I remember when Americans understood what we were facing. And we were told different promises by different people, but yet here they are. And you could argue 5 times as dangerous, 6 times as dangerous, twice as rich, 1,000 times as rich. And all of it because of American policy as I see it. This is the first time I've ever seen anybody try to deal with it. And I don't think it's getting the proper perspective. Do you ever feel that way?
Yeah, I think in my line of work, perspective is everything. And in the news cycle, I think a lot of people are kind of stuck boiling it down to the headlines without getting the full read. So I'd love to give your listeners a little bit more information about what's going on.
Yes, please do. And I'm curious to know if there's an update on the people trapped there under the thumb of the Islamo-Nazi, what is going on for them. But tell me more of what you see happening now and how you perceive whatever is going to come out of the next 72 hours.
Yeah. So I think the big news that I've been tracking all day, really the last couple of days, is the development of it's kind of an interim or an intermediate peace agreement between us and Iran, where essentially what we're trying to do is extend the current ceasefire, make it really actually enforced, where we're going to avoid some of the back and forth trading shots that we've had since April, and kind of lower the temperature so that we can really seriously negotiate getting the Iranians to give up their highly enriched uranium, and kind of put the whole issue of their nuclear program to rest.
Now, Ryan, I don't know if it's because I was a card player or a real estate broker, I still am, but I see sometimes you need that weak jab. Sometimes you need the opponent of your negotiations to believe what you're saying. And I can't help but notice how everybody is completely thinking that it's the Iranians that are outsmarting Trump, when the reality is, who exactly represents the Iranians? Because Ayatollah number 1 asshat is gone. His son is gone. The guy who just said he was the leader of the IRGC, he's gone. Who exactly are we talking to that represents the actual government? Because I see no evidence that there is a government in Iran.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly President Trump has described there being, a regime change, and not just one, but 2 or 3. I will say that, having tracked this since start of this year, so even before the, Operation Epic Fury began, the main negotiator has been Saeed Abbas Araghchi, who's the Iranian foreign minister. He is still there, so he's still the intermediary between negotiations and whoever is in charge in Iran.
And he's the one who was in Europe during the attack, right? He's the only one that represented any of the old Ayatollah asshats, as I like to call them. Everybody can call them what they want. But he was the one that was slapping teacups with the English people during the attack in the first place, right?
I can't comment on whether he was sipping on to
slapping teacups. Yeah,
began.
Yeah. Feel free to use that in your next article. The other thing is, when you look at the destruction, have you been able to look at the destruction? Do we know how devastated it is? I mean, we have interpretations, and that's great. But ultimately, I'd like to see it, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would love to actually get some on the ground perspective. I do know that we have the the satellite feeds and the reports out of the Pentagon. They've certainly said I can't remember the last time they gave an actual percentage update, but they've said that I believe it was 85% of Iran's military / launch capability / weapons production capability has been destroyed over the course of this war. Obviously we need some more granular detail about, how many weapons are intact underground, buried under rubble versus, those sites that are buried under rubble, are they fully destroyed?
Well, you know what else I can't help but realize and notice in the perspective of what we've been facing for quite a while is that it was first a treaty when Obama perpetrated the agreement, and then they realized, well, the president can't do a treaty without Congress, so then it became an agreement, the nuclear agreement with Iran. And there were supposed to be all of these barriers and all of these people that would inspect and all of the limitations on the acquisition of different weapons. But yet, during this conflict, it would appear to me, a layman, that they had far more than anybody was telling us they had in the form of all kinds of weapons at their disposal during this conflict. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, the Iranians certainly have. I think what's really impressed us or impressed upon me during the course of this conflict is the utility of these one-way attack drones, and that is a real asymmetric threat capability where really cheap weapon, easy to produce. We may have destroyed most of their production capability, but that, I think, is something that they could retool a lot quicker than, say, their ballistic missile program.
Sure, they're like 15 grand. They're 15 grand to produce in Ukraine. The Iranians might be able to produce it for 4. How do we know?
Yeah. I mean, certainly we're talking the low double-digit thousands or even less, and certainly I think that they in that region they're a little bit better at. I guess being a little bit extra resourceful and, reutilizing some scrap parts.
And the other fascinating reality is to watch how comfortable they are bombing their fellow Islamic-run areas that surround them, and how many American bases they knew precisely where our guys were. Now, I might be suspicious, and then I read your article. Is it possible that they, in fact, are targeting our military by using their cell phone data?
Yeah, I mean, that is certainly a concern. During the first couple of days of the war, there was this diplomatic cable where the State Department announced that 2 U.S. troops were injured when a drone struck their hotel room, not an American base, but their hotel room. And lately we have this report, with CENTCOM acknowledging that there is a serious concern about smartphone location data being scraped up and used to put together a picture of where our troops are at if they're not on base. We can see where they're congregating if we have enough data. That is certainly a concern, and it looks like CENTCOM, was aware of this, but they may not have taken the greatest sets of precautions until the fighting actually began, and they may have done too little too late.
Now, Ryan, I'm going to take advantage of having you here because it's crucially important to also talk about the fantastic things that have been happening. And when I get Ryan Morgan, who is the chief Pentagon correspondent for Epoch Times, I'm taking advantage of it. I personally love the way in which the Trump administration has ripped out the infrastructure of not just cartels, but our own corrupt bureaucracies that have been working for decades with the drug distribution, cartels, Central, South America, Europe, Middle East. I can't help but notice how crucially important it was to, number one, get back the Panama Canal, number two, get back Venezuela, number three, in a month, secure the border, less than a month, secure the border. But I've also been reading that the narco-terrorists who have been trying to bring cocaine to be distributed by Al Sharpton and the rest of the Democrats in Washington, D.C., they seem to be getting blown up to the tune of 98% of the cocaine traffickers seem to be getting blown up in the ocean. In fact, it's down 98%. That's a pretty good positive thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, certainly that, if you were to compare the two conflicts, our focus on the Western Hemisphere versus our focus on the Middle East, the Western Hemisphere focus is playing a lot better in the polls than the Middle East conflict. Take that as you will, and certainly, we've actually ramped up. Just today I received an announcement from the Marine Corps that they sent an additional 1,300 troops to the Caribbean to assist the force buildup that's already there, that's actively been striking suspected drug boats. It may also be a force buildup for some potential action with Cuba.
See, I'm old enough to remember the cocaine boom, and Cuba was an essential distributor of that, an essential logistic hub of that. Fidel Castro and the Cuban communists have been bankrupt virtually since the day they took over the island, and a lot of the money they used was working hand in glove with narco-terrorists. So Cuba plays a big role in this as well, and they have major problems. I mean, after all, they've been faking a political philosophy since Fidel Castro took over the island. And why don't we just take that over and call that the 51st state and cut Canada out and make Puerto Rico jealous? Have you thought of this?
I have not personally thought of making Cuba the 51st state.
The island is mine.
It certainly seems like something that the Trump administration may consider. They're kind of open to the idea of adding another state.
Cuba, it's right off Florida.
After some fireworks.
Yeah, well, the thing, too, about Cuba, and the similarities are really quite there for people to witness. I mean, when you have the Cubans that have been killing their people since 1959, it really goes unmentioned. And the evidence is how many Cubans, since the dawn of communism, took over that island, how many have risked their life by swimming to America. And it's fascinating to watch American politicians talk about Cuba as if it's an alternative philosophy and discount all of the death that island has perpetrated on its own citizens. It seems to be a theme, whether we talk about Iran, whether we talk about Venezuela, whether we talk about Cuba. Have you come to the realization I have that there are many, many traitors to the American, not just America first, but just the principles of what a republic is? Do you notice how many politicians in this country are totalitarian by nature and cuckold communists that pretend that these alternatives are something that America should entertain?
I think that's a little bit too political for me to handle.
Yeah, all right, fair enough.
I try and stick to the...
well, when Congresswoman Jayapal talks about how great the Cuban healthcare system is, you'll have to forgive me. I know enough Cubans to realize it's worth the swim 90 miles to get away from it. And I'm wondering, when you look at this whole thing, where do you think we should bid on the first 3-bedroom, 3-bath Trump condo? Should it be Gaza, Iran, or Cuba? Where would you put your money?
I think Cuba. I think Cuba's the front runner there.
I knew I could get you. So at the Epoch Times, when you hear the Pentagon, where do you fall when it comes to how weak we are with our weapons? And does Ukraine and the Biden agenda of giving our weapons to Ukraine and giving them the money to buy it and pretend it's somehow stoking our economy, do we know what the drawdown is of our arsenals from Ukraine? And shouldn't that be brought up when we talk about if we have a drawdown in our arsenals versus just focusing on Iran?
Yeah, I don't have Ukraine-specific numbers, but, taking a holistic look, across all the different conflicts that we've been in or involved with in some way over the past, 5 to 6 years, we are depleted. Just from the Iran conflict, I saw a report earlier this week that it said, it could take between 2 and 6 years to fully replenish our stockpiles just from the pre-war level that we had before we started with Iran. So that has a bearing on other conflicts. It's an opportunity cost for other things we might want to do around the world. For example, Acting Navy Secretary Hung Tao said that we actually have to pause our weapons deliveries to Taiwan to make sure that we have enough. Yeah.
And we just had the meeting with Trump and Xi Jinping. And I'm curious to know what you're hearing, what your interpretation is. To me, it seems as if Xi Jinping understands he should probably try to wait Trump out like the Democrats in Congress and the Senate are doing. How do you see it? What have you been hearing?
Yeah, I didn't actually see any major fireworks out of that meeting. I think Trump is kind of, there's the deal maker aspect of Trump where he's not necessarily looking to start a war, and certainly not with with an emerging power like China. But he is going to keep an eye on them, and certainly if the Chinese want to wait Trump out, that might be their best option rather than going for direct confrontation.
I also can't help but notice, I feel it's a benefit that he's not predictable. I feel that is a benefit for our safety. And I feel that if you're Xi Jinping or even Vladimir Putin or anybody, you have to take into consideration, he has been the first president that pretty much has said, if we're in danger, if we're threatened, if you're not behaving the way we want, we will bomb you. And he has done it. And I'm curious to know if you think that that's a big benefit, the way it would appear just to the layman.
Yeah, I mean, it has its pluses and minuses. So, if we're in the middle of negotiating with a party and then we decide to bomb them during those negotiations, it could tell other parties that we're negotiating with that, oh, watch out, like we could attack you at any moment. That may make them want to rush to a deal quicker with us, or it may make them say, our negotiations are not necessarily to be trusted. And anytime we sit down at the table across from the United States, be wary that we might, be nervous.
You know what's interesting, too, if you think about the theocracy that we're dealing with, it really does. That's Jimmy Carter. That was the president when they took over power. What do you think the odds are that they will not be led by a theocracy, and there will be some form of democracy is too vain, some form of representative government, some form other than a theocracy that runs Iran? Is there any chance, in your opinion, or do we have a chance of there finally being an Iran that can resemble Persia, can resemble Iran before Jimmy Carter?
Looking at the current deal, I don't necessarily see a change in the government structure, the government model of Iran out of this current deal. Certainly, down the line, if the Iranian military is significantly defanged, and we've heard that they've been pretty heavily damaged, if there is an internal uprising, they may not have the weapons at hand to try and put that down. That is kind of, I think, the best case scenario for a change in government.
This is all good news, and I will keep an eye on the Epoch Times. And you should consider next board meeting saying we're going to have a real estate section of all of the places Trump is now going to build the Trump Towers. I think the Epoch Times real estate section is something that should be worked on. I mean, after all, you have it nailed everywhere else from everything you write about. Think about a real estate section, will you?
Yeah, I'll take it up.
Ryan Morgan, thanks for making time for me. You can find his writings at theepochtimes.com. Thanks again for making time.
All right. No worries.
We'll be back with your calls and comments.
What if everything you've been told about government, health care, poverty, energy, and even science is a carefully constructed lie? In Shaun Thompson's new book, What If It's All a Lie? Shaun Thompson dismantles the myths at the core of modern America. This is the book the ruling class doesn't want you to read. And once you do, you won't see the world the same way again. Order your copy today at